So Marc, if we can get started, that would be wonderful. So if you want to start with how you first learned about the storyboard concept.
Okay, so it was a unusual way of finding out about it, to be honest. I was sat at home one weekend thinking, how am I going to help our parents and our governors really understand what Curriculum for Wales is? Because as adults, we've all been through one curriculum structure if we've been in state schools in Wales or in the UK, and Curriculum for Wales is a different focus, a different approach to that. So I was finding that it was hard for parents and governors, people outside the profession, to really understand what Curriculum for Wales is and what we're aiming to achieve and what our goals are. So whilst I was musing over this and thinking about how I was going to support our parents, I thought, well, I'll ask Yvonne if she knows of anything that might help me just get this simple message across. Which was a Saturday night, and I think I'd got fed up of watching the Masked Singer at that point because I'd guessed who it was. And I wasn't expecting Yvonne to reply, but she must have got fed up of the Masked Singer as well, because she replied with, well, have a look at this. And it was a link to a video that you had done, Alison, talking about streamlining the curriculum. Well, straight away, I wasn't able to sleep that night because it connected with me straight away, because I thought, oh, wow, this is just looking at the visuals that are on the video of the storyboards themselves. It just made it so clear, so concise, and sort of user friendly. It invited you to have a look at it. So I was then bubbling with ideas over that weekend and started playing around with it straight away. Initially experimenting with it just solely to think, well, how can we communicate with our parents and our governors, which was our original goal. But then as I was playing with it more, I realized that actually this would support our teaching staff massively with the professional learning challenge that we were experiencing, and that we'd done a lot of work on curriculum development. But when it came down to the sort of nitty gritty of developing the actual learning that was going to take place, there was a lot of big thinking going on in there, and the staff were almost a bit overwhelmed by the possibilities. And I realized that maybe storyboarding would help them just to focus that thinking, bring it down, focus on the purpose, really come back to the core of why you're doing it, rather than being overwhelmed by all their ideas. So that's where we really got hooked into it at that point. And I think that's when I then reached out to you with a few examples going, is this any good? Because I was just experimenting.
That's right. And so, Marc, it was just such a refreshing opportunity to see your immediate initial drafts, because they were already very solid. And so a couple things that I want to highlight based on what you're starting to clarify so far is that, one, you were immediately drawn in by the images, the opportunity to start to see that this is potentially a clear and compelling way to invite people into the learning journey. And again, what I was hearing you say, Marc, is that you were originally designing this from a parent perspective to give them clarification as to what does this learning journey look like for your children, as well as the governors. But yeah. I think the other part that I heard you say after is that you also started to believe the power of this for teachers and the opportunity that it helps them get their ideas sorted, both potentially, doing that kind of planning opportunity, but really starting to tune in and start to think about who's my target audience.
Yeah, well, I saw it really as, in terms of our planning process we'd established, we'd developed, as schools in Wales are doing, we'd developed our own approach to how we're developing our curriculum within the guidance that's available on our hub. And there was a point at the end of that planning process, I suppose, where we do our medium-term planning, maybe a term ahead, that had always been the bit that I wanted us to work on, because it still wasn't tight enough, it wasn't clear enough, it wasn't purposeful enough. And this sort of came in at the right time, thinking, well, actually, this area that as a staff we all still need to work on, we could actually streamline our process, tapping into the words there, but streamline our process by using storyboards to capture and communicate that last phase in our planning. So our planning process, as we already had, has stayed exactly the same and is evolving as it does with sort of our iterative approach. And this has been the next iteration, I suppose, embedding the storyboards into our planning processes. And that, I think, in terms of thinking about it from the other point of view of the broader staff,
Mm.
um, I think it gave everyone something to hold on to. It gave a really secure, clear anchor and a process for that last stage. I think it just gave them something that they could go, okay, so this is how I visualize my journey, I suppose,
Mm.
through the learning I'm going to develop, and how I can put it together in a way that I really deeply understand, but I can also really clearly communicate that to other people.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it would be so helpful for our audience to see a couple of examples. So I think if we can pull up the science and technology one first for year 5, and if you can talk us through sort of your sort of approach when you started to draft this. What did you start to think about first? What did you think about next? And how was that process looking like for you?
I think that the starting point that I sort of naturally arrived at, I suppose, was the why. The why am I learning this section? Because as a school and across the approach for curriculum for Wales, it's all about purpose. Why am I doing it? What's the point? Why is this cohort of children needing this experience, or why do we need to access this learning? So it was the why that I was really trying to hook into first, and it was quite a challenge in the sense of getting it into a concise enough form to communicate in the storyboard. But actually, that's a really good challenge because it made me think more deeply. And I think the experience I've got from doing this and having feedback from you about this, Alison, is that basically every word's got to earn its place on a storyboard. There's no space for waffle. There's no space for, teacher talk that we like to do. You've just got to get to the point. And that forces you to be really purposefully driven in defining why you're doing this. And then
Mm.
from there, I would step into the learning experiences. Again, you've been fab at trying to help me refine those to really make them, again, purposeful and focused, so that what we're offering actually links to why I'm doing this in the first place, which more broadly for our staff was a challenge anyway. That's why I like this section, because being teachers, we'd have 101 different ideas that we could possibly do, but you couldn't possibly do all those 100 ideas for every OLE. And
That's
to
right.
actually have that point of going, no, I need to like sieve this out and distill it a bit and get down to the nitty gritty of what's really going to have the biggest impact. That's why I like that section of the storyboard. And then I almost jump to the images last. And the images I've enjoyed the most, I suppose, because it's also gave me a chance to play around with AI. So I was able to take my why content and some of the learning experience, drop it into AI and see what it generates. And tweaking that to try and get some really potent images, because I know as a sort of user or the audience of this, it's the images that pulled me in first.
Mm.
So I wanted to have images there that really clearly communicated to the parents, to colleagues, to the governors, to whoever wanted to look at it, where we were sort of going to give them a flavour to pull them in. And then from once I've got all that there, then I'm thinking about the essential questions that sort of umbrella over all the learning, I suppose, that the ones I'm really
Mm.
chasing. So that's, and I don't know whether that's the right or wrong process, but that's what's worked for me. And that's what I've sort of promoted with our staff. And they've been working with that as well. And they've been finding that process beneficial.